Okay, let's dive in. We're tackling a life that's almost overwhelming in its scope, aren't we? 70 years on the throne. Queen Elizabeth II.
70 years. It's hard to even grasp. Spanning, well, basically the entire post-war era, right into our modern digital age.
Exactly. From a world recovering from war, an analog world, to, the internet, globalization. She was monarch of 32 different sovereign states during her lifetime, 15 when she passed. Trying to get your head around that kind of historical span, it's a lot for anyone.
It really is. And that's kind of our goal here today, isn't it?
Yeah.
To synthesize it. We've looked at a whole range of sources, biographies, constitutional analyses.
Right.
And the aim is to pull out those key moments, the political turning points, the personal challenges, the constitutional tests that really defined her role as queen and as head of the Commonwealth, too.
We're not just listing dates. We want to get under the skin of it.
Yeah.
How did this woman who famously promised her whole life to service manage to be this constant, non-political anchor while the world just completely changed around her?
That's the core question. We'll trace it all the way from, well, her being this accidental heir.
Her wartime service, which seems crucial.
Absolutely. Then the Commonwealth, the media storms, the family stuff. Right up to those final years, the Platinum Jubilee, still making that vow.
It's like a shortcut, maybe, to understanding what duty really meant for her.
So starting at the beginning, it's fundamental to remember she wasn't supposed to be queen. She was born Princess Elizabeth York, April 21st, 1926. About 2:40 in the morning, actually.
By C-section, right. At her grandparents' place in Mayfair, 17 Bruton Street.
That's the one. And crucially, her place in line, well, it was pretty far down, relatively speaking.
Third, wasn't it? Behind her Uncle Edward, the Prince of Wales, who everyone assumed would marry and have kids.
Exactly. And behind her own father, Prince Albert, the Duke of York. The expectation was, a comfortable life as a minor royal, maybe marry into European nobility. Definitely not the top job.
No one saw 1936 coming. That abdicate, it just changed everything.
Completely pivotal. Her uncle, Edward VIII, gives up the throne after less than a year. All because he wanted to marry Wallis Simpson, an American socialite, twice divorced. It wasn't just a family drama. It was a massive constitutional crisis.
Rocked the whole institution. And suddenly, her father, who was known for being quite shy, not really cut out for the limelight, he's King George VI.
And pin-year-old Elizabeth. Overnight, she becomes the heir presumptive. Her whole life's trajectory just shifts. Instantly.
But even then, it wasn't completely certain, was it? There was still a catch.
That's a really important constitutional point people sometimes miss. Back then, they still had male preference primogeniture.
Right, so if her parents had later had a son...
He would have jumped ahead of her in the line of succession.
Yeah.
Even if he was younger. So her being heir presumptive meant exactly that presumed, unless a brother came along.
Wow. So for about a decade, her future still had that slight uncertainty. Her position depended entirely on her parents not having any more children, specifically a boy.
Which, as history turned out, they didn't. But imagine living with that possibility. It really underscores how accidental her path to the throne initially was.
And that sense of duty, which became her hallmark, really started to form during the war years, didn't it? World War II.
Absolutely. When Britain went to war in '39, there were serious discussions, high-level talks, about evacuating the princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret, to Canada for safety, away from the Blitz.
But her mother famously put her foot down.
She did. Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother. Her response became legendary. The children won't go without me, I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave. Simple as that. They stayed.
Mostly at Windsor Castle, right? Sharing the danger, in a way, showing solidarity.
Exactly. And it wasn't long before Elizabeth started her public duties. In 1940, she was just 14. She gave her first radio broadcast on the BBC's Children's Hour.
Speaking to other kids who'd been evacuated or affected by the war.
Yes, and she said something quite profound for a teenager. We are trying, too, to bear our own share of the danger and sadness of war. That phrase, bear our own share. It feels like a mission statement for her entire life.
Not above it all, but part of it.
And she backed it up with action. By February 1945, she was 18. She insisted on joining up.
Right. The Auxiliary Territorial Service, the ATS.
That's it. Honorary Second Subaltern, service number 230873. And this wasn't just ceremonial.
No, she actually trained as a driver and a mechanic, got her hands dirty. Princess Auto Mechanic, they called her.
Apparently so. Learned to strip down engines, fix vehicles. She was even promoted to honorary junior commander after about 5 months. Think about that experience, working alongside ordinary people under incredible pressure. That must have shaped her perspective immensely.
And then that amazing story from VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, May 8th, 1945.
Oh, it's wonderful. She and Margaret actually got permission to go out and mingle secretly with the crowd celebrating in London.
Incognito, can you imagine the future queen just lost in the middle of that euphoria?
She talked about it later, being terrified of being recognized, but also just swept along on this tide of happiness and relief. Down Piccadilly, Trafalgar Square, just for one night, being like everyone else. That must have been incredibly special.
A powerful memory to carry into a life of duty.
Speaking of duty, her personal life soon brought its own tests, particularly her engagement to Philip Mountbatten.
Their courtship started quite young, didn't it? She was supposedly smitten when she was just 13 and he was 18.
That's the story. They got engaged officially in July 1947, but it wasn't smooth sailing. There was actually quite a bit of controversy behind the scenes.
Really? It seems like such a solid partnership looking back. What were the issues?
Well, several things. From the establishment's point of view, Philip was foreign-born Greek and Danish royalty, though he was a British subject and served bravely in the Royal Navy.
Okay.
He didn't have any money or land, really. And the big one, politically, was his family connections. His sisters had married German aristocrats, some with Nazi links.
Ah, right after the war, that would have been incredibly sensitive.
Hugely sensitive. Anti-German feeling was still very strong. The palace courtiers were worried. Even the Queen Mother apparently had reservations, supposedly calling him the Hun in the early days. He was seen as a bit of an outsider, maybe a bit rough around the edges for them.
So what did he have to do to make it acceptable?
Quite a lot. Formally, he had to renounce his Greek and Danish titles. He converted from Greek Orthodoxy to Anglicanism, and he took his mother's family name, Mountbatten. Only then was he created Duke of Edinburgh, just before the wedding.
A complete rebranding almost.
In a way, yes. And then there's the context of the wedding itself. November 1947. Britain was still deep in post-war austerity.
Rationing was still in full effect.
Exactly. Which leads to that incredible detail about her wedding dress. She actually needed ration coupons to get the material.
No way. For the Queen's wedding dress?
Yes. The government gave her some extra coupons, and apparently women across the country sent her theirs too. But it just grounds it, doesn't it? This massive royal event, but still touched by the everyday hardship the country was facing.
So she marries Philip, they have Charles and Anne, but that relatively normal life, if you can call it that, didn't last long.
No. Less than 5 years later, February 1952. She and Philip were away on a Commonwealth tour, starting in Kenya.
Famously staying at Treetops Hotel, that iconic image.
Iconic and poignant, because it was while they were there, literally up in the trees, that her father, King George VI, died in his sleep back in Sandringham.
She was only 25, and Philip had to tell her.
Imagine that moment. She went up the ladder, a princess, and came down a queen. Flew back to Britain immediately.
And the scale of the job was immense right from the start. Queen of 7 independent countries straight away.
That's right. The UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Pakistan, and Ceylon, as it was then, the Commonwealth was already evolving.
And even her name caused a little ripple, didn't it? Choosing Elizabeth II.
It did, particularly in Scotland, because technically Scotland never had an Elizabeth I as monarch before the Union of the Crowns, so calling her the second ruffled some feathers up north. There were even protests, post boxes vandalized. A minor thing, but it showed the complexities of the United Kingdom.
But the bigger naming issue, the more personal one, was about the royal family name itself, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The House of Windsor dispute. This was a serious point of tension right after her accession. Prince Philip, supported by his ambitious uncle Lord Mountbatten, argued strongly that the royal house should change its name.
To House of Mountbatten, or House of Edinburgh, following the tradition of a wife taking her husband's name.
Exactly. Mountbatten saw it as his family's moment. Philip felt it was his right. But for the establishment, particularly the old guard like Winston Churchill and Queen Mary, her grandmother, changing the name was unthinkable.
Why? What was the big deal?
Windsor had been adopted during World War I, specifically to sound less German than Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Changing it back to a name with German roots, even via Mountbatten, was politically risky. And, well, tradition. Queen Mary was adamant.
So Elizabeth had to make a call.
She did. And she sided with tradition and Churchill. She decreed that the royal house would remain the House of Windsor.
Which led to Philip's famous outburst.
That rather bitter quote, yes. I am the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his own children. It clearly stung him deeply.
Was there any compromise later?
There was, eventually. In 1960, they agreed on the surname Mountbatten-Windsor for descendants who wouldn't have the title of prince or princess, sort of private family members. But the official name, the brand, remained Windsor. Constitutionally, that continuity was key.
Then came the coronation in 1953. A huge moment, obviously, but also a modernizing one.
Hugely modernizing, mainly because of one decision, to televise it.
Right. Not the whole thing. The most sacred parts were kept private, but most of it was broadcast.
And apparently, Philip was a big advocate for televising it, against Churchill's initial reluctance. It was a gamble, but it paid off spectacularly.
How so?
It transformed the monarchy's relationship with the public. Suddenly, millions could see the ceremony. Television ownership just exploded.
Yeah.
The number of TV licenses in the UK doubled to 3 million just for the coronation.
Wow.
And nearly 100 million people in North America watched recordings. It basically cemented the monarchy as a public, visible institution in the television age, changed expectations forever.
And she hit the ground running with global tours, too. That massive round-the-world trip right after.
Incredible undertaking, 7 months, over 40,000 miles, starting in late '53. And crucially, she became the first reigning monarch ever to visit Australia and New Zealand.
The reception must have been immense.
Phenomenal. They estimated something like 3/4 of the entire population of Australia saw her in person. This visibility was vital because the world she inherited was changing fast.
Decolonization was really picking up speed.
Dramatically. Over 20 countries gained independence from Britain just in those first couple of decades of her reign. The empire was dissolving, transforming into the modern Commonwealth. Her role was constantly shifting.
And there were political crises at home, too, like Suez in '56.
Yes, the Suez Crisis was a political disaster for Britain, and it led to Prime Minister Anthony Eden resigning. But constitutionally, it exposed a problem.
Which was?
The Conservative Party didn't have a formal way to elect a leader back then, so the Queen actually had to choose the next Prime Minister based on advice from a small group of senior figures.
So she was dragged into the political decision-making.
Essentially, yes. She appointed Harold Macmillan and later Alec Douglas home in '63 using this rather opaque consultation process. It opened her up to criticism of political bias, something the monarchy tries desperately to avoid.
And criticism did come, didn't it? Lord Altrincham in 1957.
That was a big moment. He wrote an article criticizing her personally, saying she sounded like a priggish schoolgirl, that her court was out of touch.
How did that go down?
The public reaction was mostly outrage. Altrincham actually got punched in the street by someone from the League of Empire Loyalists. But his points resonated in some quarters. The palace did make some small changes, became a bit less formal, and crucially, the whole episode highlighted the danger of the PM selection process.
Which the Conservatives eventually changed, right? They brought in a formal leadership election.
They did in 1965.
Mm-hmm.
And that took the Queen out of that difficult position, thankfully for the Crown's neutrality.
But constitutional challenges kept coming. Like the Australian crisis in 1975. That sounds complicated.
It was, and very serious. Basically, the Governor-General in Australia, Sir John Kerr, who was the Queen's representative there, sacked the elected Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam.
Sacked him? Why?
Because Whitlam's government couldn't get its budget passed by the Senate, which was controlled by the opposition. It created a massive political deadlock. Kerr used his reserve powers to dismiss Whitlam and appoint the opposition leader as caretaker PM.
Wow. And people asked the Queen to step in.
Yes. The Speaker of the Australian Parliament appealed directly to her in London, arguing Kerr had overstepped his authority and asking her to reinstate Whitlam.
What a position to be in. If she steps in, she's interfering in Australian politics. If she doesn't,
she's effectively backing the Governor-General's controversial action. It was a classic constitutional tightrope.
So what does she do?
She refused to intervene. Her official response was that the matter was reserved, under the Australian Constitution, solely for the Governor-General to decide. She upheld the constitutional independence of her Australian role from her UK one.
Even though it probably fueled Republican sentiment in Australia.
It certainly did. But she stuck to the principle of non-interference in the political affairs of one of her independent realms. It was a defining moment for how she saw her role.
Yet, on the world stage, she could be quite groundbreaking diplomatically.
Absolutely. Think about it. First British monarch to visit a communist country, Yugoslavia, in 1972, meeting Tito.
And China in 1986. That must have been huge, especially with the Hong Kong handover approaching.
Immense. These visits weren't just ceremonial. They were powerful diplomatic signals, often paving the way for politicians. She was a quiet but significant player on the global stage. Moving into the 1980s, things seemed to get, well, rockier. More personal danger, for one thing.
Yeah, those assassination attempts in 1981, two of them. Seems incredible.
It does. The first was during Tripping the Color in London, June 81. A teenager, Marcus Sargent, fired 6 blank shots at her while she was on horseback.
Blanks, thankfully, but still terrifying. And her reaction.
Utterly composed. Controlled her horse, Burmese, didn't flinch, just carried on with the ceremony. Amazing nerve.
And then just a few months later in New Zealand.
October 81 in Dunedin. Another young man, Christopher John Lewis, fired a real shot this time, a .22 rifle from a building nearby. He missed.
A real shot. That's chilling. Was he charged with attempted treason?
Not initially, strangely enough, but the danger was real. Lewis later tried to escape prison, planning to target Prince Charles on his visit. It highlights the vulnerability.
And the security wasn't always great even at home, was it? The Michael Fagan incident in '82?
Ah, yes. The intruder in her bedroom at Buckingham Palace. She woke up to find him just sitting there. A shocking lapse in security right at the heart of the monarchy.
Beyond physical danger, there were political tensions too, especially with her other realms, like Grenada.
Yes, 1983. The U.S. invaded Grenada, which was one of the Queen's independent Caribbean realms, and reportedly the Reagan administration didn't inform her beforehand.
She must have been furious. As Queen of Grenada, that's a direct affront.
Reports suggest she was very angry. It was seen as a major breach of protocol and a lack of respect for Grenada's sovereignty and her role as its head of state. Shows the complexity of being queen of multiple independent nations.
And this era also saw the rise of really aggressive tabloid media, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The gloves came off. You had editors openly saying things like, "Don't worry if it's true," about royal stories. The pressure and intrusion became relentless.
Which must have intensified the focus on her relationship with Margaret Thatcher, the prime minister for most of the '80s. Was there really friction there?
The sources strongly suggest there was. Not about party politics as such, but about the impact of Thatcher's policies.
How so?
Well, reports, particularly a famous one in the Sunday Times in '36, claimed the Queen felt Thatcher's economic policies, the miners' strike, privatization, were creating deep social divisions and hurting communities. As Queen, her concern is for national unity.
And the big sticking point was South Africa, right? Apartheid.
Yes. The Queen was deeply committed to the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth nations were united in demanding strong sanctions against apartheid South Africa. Thatcher resisted imposing comprehensive sanctions.
That must have put the Queen in a very difficult position as head of the Commonwealth.
Extremely difficult. She apparently felt Thatcher's stance was damaging the Commonwealth itself. While Buckingham Palace officially denied any serious rift, the tension was widely reported. Some, like the Canadian PM Brian Mulroney, later said the Queen worked quietly behind the scenes to push Britain towards a stronger anti-apartheid stance.
Her soft power at work again.
Perhaps. But all this, the security threats, the media glare, the family troubles, the political strains, it all seemed to come to a head in one particular year.
1992. Her annus horribilis, her horrible year.
She called it that herself in a speech.
Huh.
You could see why. It was just one thing after another.
3 royal marriage breakdowns in 1 year.
Andrew and Sarah Ferguson separated. Princess Anne divorced Mark Phillips. And then the big one, Charles and Diana separated, leading to endless damaging headlines.
Plus that huge fire at Windsor Castle in November.
Devastating fire. It caused massive damage. And then to top it off, during a state visit to Germany, protesters in Dresden actually threw eggs at her.
A horrible year indeed. And it had consequences, didn't it? Especially the fire.
Yes, the fire ignited a huge public row about who should pay for the repairs. Why should the taxpayer foot the bill, people asked, especially when the Queen didn't pay income tax.
Ah, the tax issue. That had been simmering for a while.
It had. And the pressure became immense. The annus horribilis basically forced the issue.
So the constitutional fallout was financial.
Pretty much. The Queen announced she would start paying income tax voluntarily from 1993. And the civil list, the public money for her official duties, was reformed and eventually replaced. It was a major shift towards greater financial accountability for the monarchy, driven by public opinion.
But the toughest test of public opinion was still to come, wasn't it? Diana's death in 1997.
That was perhaps the monarchy's most perilous moment in the 20th century. Diana's death unleashed this unprecedented wave of public grief, and initially, the royal family seemed completely out of step with it.
Their decision to stay at Balmoral, to shield William and Harry.
While understandable privately, it came across publicly as cold, remote, uncaring. The lack of a flag flying at half-mast over Buckingham Palace became this huge symbol of perceived royal indifference.
The public mood turned really quite hostile, didn't it? Questioning the monarchy itself.
It did. There was genuine anger. The pressure mounted intensely over those first few days.
Until the Queen changed course.
Yes, she returned to London. She agreed to the flag being flown at half-mast. And crucially, she gave that live television broadcast.
The one where she spoke as a grandmother.
Exactly. It was a very personal, direct address, acknowledging Diana's legacy, sharing in the grief. It was a remarkable turnaround. That broadcast seemed to lance the boil. The public anger just seemed to, well, dissipate almost overnight. It showed her ability, when absolutely necessary, to adapt the style of monarchy without compromising the substance.
Entering the 2000s, her reign just keeps going, hitting these incredible milestones of longevity. The Golden Jubilee in 2002.
It was a huge success, but it started under a shadow, didn't it? She lost both her sister, Princess Margaret, and her mother within a few weeks of each other, right before the main celebrations.
Margaret's funeral. That was one time she was seen openly weeping in public. Very rare.
Extremely rare. And there was media speculation, after the turmoil of the 90s and these losses, that maybe the public wasn't really up for a jubilee.
But they were wrong.
Completely wrong. The celebrations in London were enormous, huge crowds, estimates of 1 million people each day. It showed a deep wellspring of personal affection and respect for her, specifically.
And she continued making significant diplomatic gestures. That visit to Ireland in 2011 stands out.
Hugely significant. The first state visit by a British monarch to the Republic of Ireland. Given the complex, often painful history, it was a massive symbol of reconciliation, a personal commitment on her part.
She really became this constant fixture on the world stage, meeting how many U.S. presidents?
14. Starting with Truman, right through to hosting Joe Biden at Windsor in 2021. Think of the history she witnessed just through those meetings alone.
And the records just kept falling. Longest-lived British monarch in 2007.
Then surpassing Queen Victoria in 2015 as the longest-reigning British monarch ever, and the longest-reigning female head of state in global history. Just extraordinary endurance.
She even opened 2 Olympic Games in different countries, Montreal 76 and London 2012.
Which led to that brilliant moment in the London 2012 opening ceremony.
The James Bond sketch with Daniel Craig.
Absolutely fantastic. That short film, pretending to parachute into the stadium, it showed such a surprising, witty side to her.
It was genius. Probably did more for modernizing the monarchy's image than years of official engagements. She even got an honorary BAFTA for it, most memorable Bond girl yet.
She clearly had a sense of humor about herself. But throughout all this, as she got older, the question of abdication sometimes came up. Other European monarchs were doing it.
But she was having none of it.
Absolutely not. She made it clear, famously telling Canada's Governor-General Adrienne Clarkson, "It is not our tradition. Duty was for life."
Though she did apparently joke, if I became completely gaga, one would have to do something.
Yes, typical dry wit. But the commitment was absolute until the very end.
Which brings us to her final years. The pandemic must have been incredibly challenging for her.
Immensely so. Being moved to Windsor Castle in March 2020, living under strict protocols, the so-called HMS bubble. For a monarch whose life was about meeting people, that isolation must have been difficult.
But she still reached out. That televised address in April 2020 was very powerful.
It really resonated. Watched by maybe 24 million people in the UK, offering comfort, invoking that wartime spirit. We will meet again. It was exactly what the nation needed to hear.
Then came the immense personal blow of Prince Philip's death in April 2021, after 73 years of marriage.
She spoke of him leaving a huge void, and his funeral was just heartbreaking.
That image of her sitting completely alone in St. George's Chapel because of the COVID rules.
It was devastating. A global symbol of grief and loss during the pandemic, but also perfectly encapsulating her life, immense personal sorrow, born with absolute public duty and adherence to the rules.
Her final major public event was the Platinum Jubilee in 2022. 70 years.
An incredible milestone. And she used her Accession Day message that year to explicitly renew the promise she made back in 1947. As a young princess, her life dedicated to service.
And just 2 days before she died, she performed her last constitutional act,
appointing her 15th British Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Uniquely, she did it at Balmoral Castle in Scotland because of her mobility issues. The only time she appointed a PM away from Buckingham Palace. A final act of duty.
And then, very quickly after that.
Yes, on September 8th, 2022, the palace announced concerns. She died peacefully that afternoon at Balmoral. age 96.
The official cause was old age, though later reports mentioned possible underlying conditions like multiple myeloma.
The plan swung into action immediately. Operation London Bridge for the UK, and Operation Unicorn because she died in Scotland.
The scale of public mourning was immense, wasn't it?
Astonishing. Around 33,000 people filed past her coffin in Edinburgh, and then in London.
The queue for Westminster Hall, it stretched for miles.
An estimated 250,000 people waited, some for up to 24 hours, just to pay their respects. That physical commitment from the public spoke volumes about the personal connection people felt. She was finally laid to rest on September 19th at Windsor beside Philip.
So, how do you sum up a legacy like that? 70 years. Politically, her impact was defined by that consistency that determined non-interference.
But she's also hugely active in other ways, patron of over 600 organizations.
Yes, and it's estimated she helped raise over 1.4 billion pounds for charities through her patronages. That quiet, consistent support was invaluable.
And that consistency built incredible public loyalty, didn't it? Approval ratings hitting 90% around the Diamond Jubilee.
Phenomenal levels. It was often said, especially in places like Australia, that there were more Elizabethans people loyal to her personally than there were strict monarchists. Her personal popularity really sustained the institution. And she managed all this while keeping her private life remarkably private. We know about the horses, the corgis.
For great passions, starting with Dookie, her first corgi back in 1933. Those are the constants.
And those rare glimpses of informality, like washing dishes at Balmoral, they just highlight the person behind the crown.
Exactly. She maintained that balance. Absolute duty in public, but glimpses of normalcy in private.
You mentioned 15 UK prime ministers. Across all her realms, it was over 170 prime ministers she dealt with during her reign.
An incredible number. And while she almost never revealed her own political opinions, she was known to be incredibly well informed. Canadian politicians involved in the patriation talks in the early 80s, bringing Canada's constitution fully home, said she knew the files better than many British officials.
She did her homework.
Always. She took the advise and warn part of her constitutional role very seriously, even if we rarely saw it.
So perhaps a final thought for you, our listener, to take away. Elizabeth II embodied constancy. She saw her main role constitutionally as not interfering. But how does 70 years of deliberate non-interference combined with that unwavering devotion to duty actually end up shaping the political and social landscape, perhaps more profoundly than any single political action could? Something to ponder. That knowledge is yours to explore further.